Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
Not a single Evan has ever won the Stanley Cup.
Isn't that crazy?
What is wrong with you people? Brad's have won the Stanley Cup. Ryan's have won the Stanley Cup. Why haven't...
I don't know. It's done this year, though.
Are you... Oh, that's right. Yeah, because there's one on each team. I thought
Yep.
you were going to make an appearance.
You'll find out.
Well,
It won't be in Edmonton, I'll tell you that.
Oh, yeah, you're going to go play in Sunrise.
Yeah.
If I had to pick the most Sunrise, Florida person of all time, it'd be Evan.
You're kind of close to West Palm Beach, I guess.
I don't know enough about Florida geography to dispute that fact, so I'm going to take it at your word. No, Evan, that is an insane fact. Like, for how long the Stanley Cup's been awarded?
Who even recognized that was indeed a fact?
We have the weirdest narratives. Like, the Stanley Cup is so easy to advertise this year. The returning Florida Panthers, this powerhouse team that's built for the playoffs. Paul Maurice is probably their most charismatic person in that organization. You have Matthew Tkachuk, who's easy to sell. And then you have the NHL's golden child in Connor McDavid finally reaching the biggest stage. They got to be thrilled that, you know, the whole world gets to watch him. And the stuff we see out there is no Evans have ever won the Stanley Cup. A meal has been made about how far away Edmonton and Florida are from each other. Like, oh, this is the furthest distance between two cities. Yeah, that's a fun fact once. But it feels like that's all we've been talking about all week. Is everyone okay? What are we doing?
It's the NHL's fault for the way they scheduled this. There is too big of a gap.
Yeah.
And when we are left to our own devices as a society, doesn't go well.
We need help. The legitimate fact we're trotting out is North America is big. To which you say, oh, okay,
Yes, it is.
great. Anyhow.
What meals will be served on the plane? My guess, spicy pork and broccoli.
Oh, man. No more, please. All right, folks. Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, and lots more. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we have some Red Wings news for you, a signing, potentially some other signings as Steve Yzerman starts to meet with agents of their key players and restricted and unrestricted free agents. We'll be having conversations about a goalie that we just recently talked about before jumping into the world of prospects. We'll be doing our profile on one Beckett Sennecke this episode, who is one prospect who's, I think, really interesting for Detroit, even if maybe just a touch out of their range, but you never know. We'll talk about an idea of trading with New Jersey for that 10th overall pick before we do our Stanley Cup Final preview between Edmonton and Florida, how Edmonton got there, what the league is going to take away from, you know, its copycat status and trying to emulate these teams. Predictions as we endeavor to be wrong as usual, and a lot more NHL news before we jump into overtime. Before all that, I want to let you know that this podcast is proudly brought to you by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. If you want to support the show, you get access to some really great benefits like our Patreon exclusive bonus overtime episodes, which record right after these main ones. They're a lot of fun. We answer any questions that don't make the main show. We let loose, have fun, talk about hockey, not hockey. We have Thoughts with Evan, which is usually a blast. And I usually throw in some outtakes into that episode. You also get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord. Additionally, you get automatically entered into all of our giveaways. For example, we are giving away 2 tickets to every Red Wings home game. We've done so for the last 2 seasons, the vast majority going directly to our Patreon supporters. So again, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. Steve Yzerman, the agents for David Perron, Patrick Kane, and presumably Lucas Raymond, those meetings are probably going to happen in the next week or so here. So I want to prime this by saying this is news, but it's not really news. Like, this is just kind of the stuff that happens leading into free agency. When you have a pending unrestricted free agent like Kane or Perron, you obviously want to do so sooner. When you have a restricted free agent like Lucas Raymond and then Moritz Seider as well, you don't want to wait too long, but there's less of a big rush on it. But what do you make of especially, let's start with Perron and Kane, because those are 2 guys who maybe have different stated intentions, but it's kind of up in the air on whether the Red Wings are going to bring them back.
Again, once one domino falls, It will clarify our opinions about what should happen next. I know we had a lengthy segment a few episodes ago where I know I was on the side of they need to get Seider and Raymond done first so you know what kind of cap space you're dealing with your UFAs, but there's not the urgencies on the RFAs like there would be on the UFAs. So it's an interesting dynamic. I guess if he at least has an idea of the range Raymond and Seider could fall in, he could still work around that and just hammer out the, I don't know, few $100,000 difference, no trade clause, whatever other hiccups there might be on those. I struggle to see a good path where they're able to keep Perron and Kane. It's one of those, weird complications where I like both of them and I would like both of them to come back, but their cap space, their pending RFAs, where they're at, I have a tough time seeing a world where they can afford both of them unless they both come in on super team friendly deals, which of course is not going to happen. It's interesting. I'm really, really curious to see where the priority would lie here.
It's also important to note that these aren't the only players whose agents are meeting with Steve Yzerman. This is just what was reported by Pierre LeBrun, and that just depends on what sources he has. So don't take this as a complete and total representation of what's happening, and anything that's not stated isn't happening. That's not the case. I'm sure Seider's agent has also met. That's Claude Lemieux, just in case you didn't know, with Steve Yzerman. And I tend to agree, Brad. You kind of want to know where you're at with Lucas Raymond and Mo Seider officially before you can start to really make moves. But at the same time, these kind of preemptive meetings are good because you also want to know, hey, right off the bat, what are you looking for? Because these aren't players who are 29, 30 years old and you need back on your team. You would like to have both of them back. There's going to be differing opinions, but personally, yeah, you would love Patrick Kane back. And if Perron can come back at a relatively friendly deal, you can see what he brings to this roster. But they're expendable in a way where if they're asking for something ludicrous, then you just know off the top, like, hey, I can't get to where you want. You can't get to where we want, evidently. So come July 1st, you're going to be an unrestricted free agent who's going elsewhere. And it's good to establish that beforehand. You never want that to be a surprise closer to free agency. You need to have your strategy set out.
Some UFAs need to go circle the wagons and talk to other teams to really understand what their value is. They might say, you know what, I think I'm worth this. Like, okay, go talk to other teams. And other teams may give them the same number the Red Wings are. And there's a lot of comfort in being at the same team you were on the previous year for a longer amount of time. So it's always a card that GMs can play to let the UFAs go see what's out there and see what the market says they're worth. So it could be something Steve Yzerman employs in his favor, hopefully.
It's a classic rule of negotiation. Always be ready to actually walk away. Not say you're going to and then stay at the table. Like, you have to be ready to walk away. And that applies to both the GM and the player. And that's a good point, Evan, and it's happened many times. The classic example is Steven Stamkos, who took meetings with other teams before he came back and took less money with Tampa Bay because he realized what he had there, and that was a priority for him.
No state income tax? Is that what he had?
I forgot. You know what? We actually didn't get into that last episode, the no state income tax thing. Maybe we'll do it this one, but I'm sure it doesn't hurt. That and the golf carts around.
And the Sea-Doos.
Yeah. It's
oceanfront property. Yeah, it seems like it's okay.
Gators, though.
Yeah. You got a fast Sea-Doo, you can get past them.
So, again, we're not going to make a meal of this or project too much into something that's pretty standard, but these conversations, it's June 5th now. You're going to want to know pretty well where you're at with a lot of these guys in the next couple of weeks. And whether pen hits paper is a different story, but your strategy has to be laid out. And I think, Brad, you're right. Going back to your first point, Seider and Raymond are going to dictate all of this.
Yeah, if a bridge versus a long-term deal for each of them could dramatically swing what they're able to do on UFAs. You could be talking between the two of them. What could that be? A $6 to $10 million swing in your available cap space? If each of them are taking something around $9 million for 8 years, but you get them on a bridge for 6.5, that's a substantial amount of money that you could spend. I'm still in the camp of pay them now so that they have a smaller cap hit later. and you just deal with it for the next couple years. But yeah, it'd be pretty damn important to know where they're at so you can work around it at least to some degree.
Yeah, and again, it's not completely up to Steve Yzerman. If they want that bridge because they want to capitalize on future cap jumps, then yeah, it's going to suck for future flexibility. But if you're forced into that bridge, then $3.5 million, $4 million, whatever it might be, that's a whole other player you can go chasing for agency. That is an upgraded player you can go chasing for agency. That is, you want to make a move at Marchessault, for example. You want to make a move at a goaltender. Like, it opens up a lot of doors, and you're going to want to know what you're working with. So that's the Red Wings free agent mini news. We will update you as that comes along and let you know what we hear. An actual Red Wings signing, and this is just, one of those, it's that time of year where you bring in prospective players from overseas, but the Red Wings signed left winger Jakub Rychlovsky. I hope I'm saying that one right. We haven't heard Ken or Mick say it on air yet, but Jakub Rychlovsky on a 2-year entry-level contract. He's a 22-year-old left shot winger from Czechia. I think this is Pronman who classified him as a strong skater with good hands, offensive hockey sense, and the ability to finish from range. There is some debate on how dynamic he is skill-wise for a forward who's sub 6 feet, but he skates well enough to give him a real chance to play games. So 26 goals, 20 assists in 51 games in the Czech League last season. This is just another Brome-style organizational depth thing, yeah?
Yeah, this is, he can help out Grand Rapids. And if he develops further, the foundation of skill is good enough that maybe there's something there. But in all likelihood, it's Grand Rapids help.
It's crazy to see his stat line just over the past year. He's 5 goals, 12 assists for 17 points in 22-23. And he was 26 goals, 20 assists for 46 points this season. So, you reward guys for big seasons like that and see what happens. It was a free asset.
Yep. And, if you're graduating players from Grand Rapids and you want to add someone who can play, like you said, Evan, it's a free asset. You didn't have to give anything up to get him. You didn't even spend a draft pick on him. Then he could be in Grand Rapids, and that's just as fine. So I'm happy we're gone from the days where we have to, make that into an hour-long conversation, though. That feels good.
Yeah, maybe he could be a second-line winger because our second-line winger had 31 points last year.
We weren't unreasonable to do it. It was just sad. So we'll see how Jakub Rychlovsky fits into the organization. And then one other quick Red Wings note. Jan Bednar is one of the players who the Red Wings let their exclusive signing rights to him lapse. We said that last episode. Well, shortly after, Grand Rapids went out and gave him a contract to return to the organization for a year. So he will still be in the Grand Rapids specific sphere, and we'll see if he actually gets games there. But it wasn't a Red Wings contract, but a Grand Rapids contract. So just a quick clarification for something that happened right after. Okay, let's move on. Beckett Sennecke, our prospect profile for this episode, and spoiler, one of the more popular "what if this guy falls, how happy would you be" players. He is, I think, representative of one of those guys who could be a little bit more high-end in terms of what he brings to the table offensively. Played for Oshawa, pro frame, 6'2", about 180 pounds, right winger. What do you make of Beckett Sennecke, and where do you think he's going to go?
So he's an interesting case because 6'2", can skate, very, very highly skilled, can make plays one-on-one, can make plays through traffic, can distribute, can score, can do it all. And, you look at that and you go, well, that should be a slam dunk top 10, top 5 pick. His production in the regular season was just okay. He was over a point per game, but relative to his toolkit, it was underwhelming. Like, with his toolkit, that guy should have been an easy 80, 90, maybe even 100-point player this year, and he wasn't. I think he was just a hair over a point per game. But he did explode in the playoffs. And Oshawa, though a good team, was not necessarily expected to go to the OHL final, and they did. But that also comes with a caveat of, Oshawa wasn't a terrible team, so it's not like the Nate Danielson situation in Brandon where he was on an island, and that's why his production was where it was and not much higher, because obviously we saw what happened when Danielson got to Portland. Sennecke, you would have hoped would have been higher, but the toolkit is pretty hard to deny. There's not a lot that leaves you wanting when you watch him. It's just a question of, was his slow first half in the OHL the reason the production wasn't there and he was just figuring things out and then once it clicked, he took off? Or is there some underlying issue there, finishing issue, hockey sense issue, whatever it might be? Hard to see on film because it doesn't look like those are issues. But yeah, that's pretty much the only red flag around him because the frame, the kit, the skating, all very, very enticing.
It's crazy to see how his split happened when we came into 2024. Before that, he was 25 points in 28 games, so under a point per game. Then he was 43 points in the last 35 games for 2024, and then had 22 points in 16 playoff games. So clearly something happened and started to click for him. But yeah, like you said, Brad, he's got that pro size. A lot of the scouts say he could still add more to his frame, which would make him very, very enticing. And, you know, he can make plays all over the ice, and he's got a pretty solid release at all different angles. So, you know, he's been one of the big risers on the draft boards that I've seen so far. Hard to think he'll be there for the Red Wings, given how hot of a commodity he is. But he does have very enticing NHL upside.
Whenever a player has variable stats in their draft years or approaching their draft years, I much prefer to see what Beckett Sennecke has, which is that split where you can almost see where he's figured it out or something changed, because that's development, right? You don't want to paint it with a broad brush and say that's definitely what it is. But to me, in general, I would much rather see someone who figured it out at some point and his game got consistently better after that, rather than hot start, slump, another hot streak, slump, and you know, showed up in this big tournament but didn't show up in the, you know, Memorial Cup or WHL finals or something. I much prefer to see a guy who has those tools, as you mentioned, and then at some point started to figure out how to turn that into production. And I agree with you. He has the toolkit. The size is good. The skating is good. The shot is good. Obviously his puck skills and his talent is fantastic, near the top of the draft. I think his playmaking and his hockey sense is even a little bit underrated from what I've watched. I really like the guy as a player, to the point where I think by the time we get to draft day, scouts are going to be banging the table for this guy because they don't want to be the ones who pass on him when you see 5 years from now, you're like, how did Beckett Sennecke go, 19th when he had all the tools and he's still in part of that season demonstrated what those tools can do. So I'm not saying he's a perfect player with no risk, but I am saying I think he has a really good shot to be, a top 10 talent that you could potentially get a bit later than that.
Yeah, and we have a very recent example of someone on this trajectory. Hate to give the Leafs credit for anything, but this was kind of what happened with Easton Cowan last year, and I don't like Easton Cowan's toolkit as much as Sennecke. Cowan had a very weak first half, exploded in the second half, had a strong playoffs. Toronto reached for him in the first round, and he won OHL MVP, playoff MVP, everything. He was unstoppable this year, right up till the Memorial Cup final. Shed a tear for London.
Oh,
never.
It's so devastating that the London Knights lost in heartbreaking fashion. It'd be really sick and twisted if you smiled while saying that sentence.
But yeah, so obviously Cowan himself is no lock in the NHL yet, but looks like a pretty good bet. And Sennecke's trajectory was very similar in his draft year, and we saw Cowan sustain even better production all this year. You have to assume the same thing will likely happen with Sennecke next year.
It's not like he caught lightning in a bottle in the playoffs and that is now leading to his meteoric rise. Like, this has been sustained over 41 games, including 22 playoff games. So it's not like it's just a flash in the pan. I feel very confident that this is who he is, and I still think there's more to it, and I think he's just scratching the surface of his potential.
Beckett Sennecke is in my list that is probably comically long at this point because I feel like I've said that about so many guys, but I would happily move up for Beckett Sennecke. I'm not selling the farm, but I'd pay a premium to move up to grab him. He's right there with, T. Iginla. Berkeley Catton won't get that low, but Berkeley Catton, a lot of those guys where if those defensemen push the forwards down and the centers push the wingers down even further, I move up a few spots for Beckett Sennecke. One final point, in case it matters to you, right shot winger as well. So, at different points, depending on roster construction, sometimes that matters a lot, sometimes it doesn't. But helpful for some.
He's there and Cole Yzerman are there at 15, or wherever the Red Wings end up picking. Who do you take?
Brad, you answer first. You sound like my dog. I think I lean Sennecke.
It's tough. It's a tough call.
If Yzerman,
like,
obviously,
Sennecke is way more well-rounded than Yzerman, which is the appeal there. But
yes.
Yzerman has that one elite trait that you can't find anywhere else. I don't know. I'm torn. I probably lean Sennecke, but I could easily be talked into either one.
Yep, I want to be. It's the safety for me. I think Sennecke could be that top 6 winger who produces, and I think that comes with less risk than Cole Yzerman. Mind you, if Cole Yzerman is this tale that we've heard 100 times and he comes out and he's Cole Caulfield or whatever it might be, then yeah, that's going to be extremely upsetting, and I'm going to scrub this episode from existence so I sound like...
Okay, good.
Yeah,
I'm glad we're all on the same page with that.
Yeah. Who do you take, Evan?
I'm still taking Yzerman. Like, I just think the US NTDB has just been so overanalyzed because of how strong those draft classes have been for the last 4 years that I think Cole Yzerman is going to be an absolutely surefire, good player, good to great player at the NHL level. Not to say I don't like Beckett Sennecke, but the Red Wings need to go for a guy who could be a 40-goal scorer, which I don't see from Beckett.
And also, while we're on the topic of Beckett Sennecke, it's probably the only chance where we're going to talk about the Oshawa Generals on the pod, so I have to bring it up. Them going back to the two-tone helmet this year is an elite move, right?
I did not even... Oh, yeah, no, yeah.
That was a big thing in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was your typical 90s BS of ridiculousness, but I love it.
When did they do that? When did they make that switch? Was it just this year?
I don't even know if it's their permanent or if they it's just with their alternate.
Jersey, yeah,
I have no idea, but I love it.
That is such a classic look too.
Oh, it's sick.
Beckett Sennecke, we'll see where he goes. Add him to my very long list of I'll trade up for him. And on that note of trading up, the New Jersey Devils have talked about being open to trading the 10th overall pick. And that'd be a relatively steep climb for the Detroit Red Wings from 15 to 10, but not out of this world. You're not talking 15 to 5, which the NHL is not fun enough for those kinds of things to happen. So if the Devils are open to trading 10th overall, and the Devils really are that team that are trying, I'm going to sound like a broken record because I feel like we say this every year, but they're a team that has the talent to be a lot better than their standings dictated. Do you pay the premium and get pick 10 from the Devils and give them a Berggren plus pick 15 plus whatever it might take? What do you do there?
That would be my Berkeley Catton move. I think we've seen enough drafts and enough rankings from enough insiders who are well tuned in. And almost everyone I've seen, one of the forwards I want is just making it to 15. You know what I mean? So yeah. I'm more comfortable standing pat and not having to reach for an Yzerman or an Iginla or a Sennecke, because I genuinely think one of them's just going to fall there. And even with how much we like, Brand Segnegaard and Hage, they're almost certainly going to be there. Yeah, I think the only guy that I think is going to get to that 10 range that I'm passionate enough about to trade up for would be Catton, because I don't expect any of the other, quote unquote, big names to be there. And I don't think the Red Wings have a big enough need at defense to trade up for one of the premium defensemen if they fall to 10. So the reality I see where it makes sense would be if Catton falls to 10. Otherwise, I think I'd be happier just standing pat.
Normal year, I agree with you. That's the sensible way to look at it. And I really mean that. But I feel like the Red Wings are at this point now where they have so much. They have such an abundance of not just picks. Like they're not as pick wealthy as they've been in the past, but they have so many prospects who still have potential. And potential is value, especially in the world where not every prospect is going to pan out. And to me, I'm like, I don't know, just get aggressive. We talk a lot about the Red Wings. You don't want them to turn into the Minnesota Wild. And I agree, that is a risk, and you don't want to get stuck in that mucky middle. And so get aggressive. If you like a guy, if you really like a guy, whether that's Catton, whether that's Iginla, whether that's Sennecke, or, let's say something crazy, Zeev Buium falls, and I don't think he's going to fall far enough, or Caden Lindstrom is around, and you really like him, then for me, I'm happy to overpay. I'm happy to overpay on assets where you have to look at what those assets turn into down the line and go, ooh, that stings a little bit, but you still get your guy. And this comes with an implicit trust in your scouting team, either North American scouting or scouting in Europe. But if you're certain that guy's going to be your solution in your top 6 or whatever it might be, yeah, go get him. I think there's very few times where it's smart to overpay and your wallet's full right now if you're the Red Wings.
And Vegas has shown that paying with prospects works out almost all the time. At least they've done it wisely where it has.
Yeah.
But they do that for established NHLers, which is...
that's a great point.
I'm in the same boat as you. Like, you have all these prospects and picks, and you can't possibly fit them all in your lineup, even if they're all good enough. But I'm not trading a extra prospect to move up 5 picks unless it's for a grand slam. I'd rather take our abundance of prospects and throw them at Marner, Necas, whoever the hell else might be available. Take your pick, right? Where you at least know in certainty we're getting someone worthwhile, because we've seen time and time again teams trade up in the first round of the draft just to end up with the weaker player of the 2 first-round picks, right? We love Sebastian Cossa, but that's the perfect example. We got our guy, great goalie of the future, and with the picks that Dallas got from us for trading back, they turned it into Wyatt Johnston and Logan Stankoven.
Not Logan Stankoven.
Doesn't matter what order they picked him in.
You know what, Brad? As a Red Wings fan, I have to hold on to that one.
Fair enough. I'll let you have it. Either way, it's especially in that range of the draft where it's so not predictable. Like, when you're in the top 5, history has shown you can, with reasonable accuracy, predict how these guys are going to rank going forward, right? Your number 1 overall pick is going to be a stud, number 2, a little lesser, number 3, so on and so forth. But once you get out of that top 5, there is a lot of variance. So, yeah, I'm all on board for throwing all the picks and prospects in the world, but man, I kind of want a little more certainty if we're paying whatever you would consider a premium.
Okay, but you're also in a position where Jonatan Berggren might not be wanting to stay in the Red Wings organization, and that's like an almost unheard of sweet spot where you have a player of value who you have already kind of said doesn't fit into how you want to play your NHL team, is still a force, has demonstrated that he's a force. Look what he did in the AHL, especially in the playoffs, and can play in a team's middle 6 next season, depending on what they think of him. When is that ever a player that you're seeking to trade? And that's what the Red Wings have. So pick 15 and Berggren, how high do you think that can move you?
12.
Yeah, I think that. It's a boring answer, but I think you're right.
New Jersey has explicitly stated they would trade it for goaltending.
Well, Berggren, strap on the pads.
Alex Lyon.
I don't think they're looking at anybody in the Red Wings the main team's organization. They would be looking at Cossa and Augustine.
Yeah, and at that point,
that gets uncomfortable.
At that point, moving one of those guys and pick 15 is extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah,
to the point where I have to agree with Brad that you do that for someone established if you're doing it. It's a fair point, and I know in the end you're right. I've kind of just taken on. Evan put it correctly. Like the Vegas Golden Knights have shown what being aggressive can do for you in this league. It can burn you, of course, but if you do it in a calculated manner, like it's a league where it's slow as molasses in terms of developing your prospects into players in your NHL team. It's slow as molasses in terms of moving up in the draft. The draft moves slow as molasses.
Oh, God.
So anything you can do to kind of get ahead of other people, like very few teams are going to be incentivized to keep up because that's just not the way the NHL operates. I hope it changes in the future, but yeah, I'm kind of a fan of aggressive moves, as diluted as it might be to seek those. Okay, that was our prospect profile. That's a conversation about trading up for 10th overall. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be back after that. But first, we want to let you know that this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast is proudly brought to you by Labatt Blue Light. Created in 1983, this premium light Canadian Pilsner is a delicately balanced beer brewed with Cascade hops and a blend of malt. It's fresh, crisp, and brewed to the highest quality standards. There's a little bit of Canadian kindness in every sip of Labatt Blue Light. How did it get in there? They're Canadian. That's how. You can spread the love yourself by sharing a Labatt. And when you do share a Labatt, you're not just sharing a beer. You're sharing an experience that'll pair with anything from hockey to a hoedown. So next time you're watching a hockey with your buds, be sure to share a Labatt, because while you might not all root for the same team, although we on this podcast do hope you're rooting for the Red Wings, you can all enjoy a Labatt Blue Light. We honestly love going to games in Detroit and seeing Labatt being the beer that fans clamor for all over the arena. It's a reliable beer and great to have in your hand when celebrating a goal. So head to the link in the description of this episode or the one you see on your screen to find Labatt in stores near you today. You must be 21 or older, and as always, enjoy responsibly. The NHL is a copycat league, and Florida is doing something that isn't easy to copy, but I feel like that's way more likely to be the template for what teams are going to try to, mimic in the future, rather than Edmonton, which is have the best player on the planet at times, and maybe oftentimes the second best player on the planet on your team, and then randomly have a goalie who lost his job in the playoffs go on an insane tear when he got back in net and win you the series. Edmonton doesn't make sense, but they're in the Cup Finals. They won Game 6 with 10 shots on goal. 10 shots on goal.
But one of those 10 shots was sick.
Oh my God, dude, he is. How do you make Miro Heiskanen, who we just talked about as an elite defenseman? We cursed the guy. He had him turning the wrong way. And there's this whole thing about, he was the wrong-handed defenseman and he was on his offside, blah, blah, blah. Brother, that happened in a microsecond. McDavid would have made anybody.
It was just his turn. It was Miro Heiskanen's turn.
McDavid's an alien. Edmonton moves on to the Cup Finals. And I have to say I'm a little bit surprised based on how rough their goaltending situation and at points their defense situations look in the playoffs so far.
And yet they've rattled off 100 straight penalty kills.
Another thing where you're like, unless you knew it for a fact, it would not have made sense.
No, I just assume the other team's missing the net a lot. I understand they have good coaching, a good system, and they actually have a lot of good players outside of the few that we make fun of all the time because they're bad. But yeah, it doesn't make sense. Nothing about the Oilers makes sense other than the fact that McDavid and Draisaitl have just went sicko mode all playoffs. And even Hyman, I think he scored another 50 goals in the playoffs.
Tappan Merchant, McDavid Merchant, who cares, man?
100-point scorer from last season is the fifth most important forward on their team is something I heard today. And I'm like, wow, I forgot about Nugent Hopkins.
Yeah, he's tied for fourth in playoff scoring, and the Oilers have 5 of the top 7 point getters in the playoffs right now.
Depth. Who needs depth?
I honestly think the only outcome for this series is a 4 or 5 game win either way. It's either Edmonton's glory run, they're going to run into Florida, who seems like they were built in a lab for the playoffs, is just going to demolish them and make all of their flaws gaping holes, or Edmonton defying logic and just McDavid dry-settling their way through everything is going to be too much for even Florida, and that no one can match them. Because honestly, Dallas, I thought was, in terms of roster construction, one of the best-built teams, if not the best-built team, and they beat them in 6.
If Edmonton wins, it'll be in 6 games. Stuart Skinner will have 2 absolute meltdown games where he gives up 5 and 6 goals respectively and still puts up a 9-17 in the series. Or Florida absolutely just runs through them. There's no in between.
There's 2 unstoppable forces running into each other. It's Sasha Barkov and the Florida Panthers, who just choke the life out of teams, versus Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Evan Bouchard, Nugent Hopkins, who just can't stop scoring right now. So something's got to give, and I really don't know what it's going to be, and we'll find out game 1 on Saturday.
There's a lot of conversation about, the Rangers and other teams who play Florida over the course of the season or in the playoffs. It's what's wrong with this team? And yeah, these teams have to improve, and they have holes. New York let down Shesterkin, and that's it's a real thing. They relied on their power play too much, and they got outshot a lot. But at some point, you just have to accept that Barkov and Florida are just that good, and they are just they're erasing teams, and they're erasing their best players. Panarin had himself a great year, fantastic year, nearly a point per game in the playoffs. Shut down by Florida. That's not easy to do. That man kicks above his own head on skates. He's not an easy man to keep contained.
That's why he keeps cutting all his hair off. It's his skate blade.
Yeah. Saves a lot of money with the barber.
Yeah.
With his contract, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, honestly. No, this series from a stylistic matchup is going to be stupid fun because I remember going back to WWP night where Florida choked the life out of the Red Wings, and we came away from that game just stunned with how good defensively they were, especially on the PK.
I'm still waiting for the Red Wings to start playing that game.
Yeah, the PK was unbelievable, and then shortly after, for another game, Paul Maurice was talking about, we're going to attack, we're going to pressure you. We understand that's going to come with a couple, mistakes, but if you don't bury those chances, we've got you. And I remember that game, DeBrincat and Kane each had a breakaway. There was a 2-on-1 between the two of them. The Red Wings didn't score on any of them, and they didn't even get a good look beyond that. But they had 3 grade A chances. So this all-out pressure, suffocate you, just smother you type of defense. But when it doesn't go exactly as they plan, it can leave some pretty big openings. When it's Connor McDavid skating into those openings, this is going to be interesting. And we know what an absolute stud Barkov is defensively, but he can't skate with McDavid. And McDavid only needs a second.
Who can skate with McDavid?
Exactly. And this series might honestly come down to, can you hold McDavid to less than 3 points per game? Because Draisaitl, I could see them, really shutting down because he just doesn't have the speed to evade their pressure like McDavid does. Hyman, I can still see winning battles in front and getting a couple of his greasy goals that way. Florida's penalty kill does a really good job of, smothering the other teams, but Edmonton has such a unique power play where there is no system, but it's so good to the point where it's just such an elaborate system where everybody's moving. There's flow, there's passing. They're not stationary in the umbrella like 90% of NHL power plays. Will Florida's all-out pressure be a hindrance on that? Because if everybody's moving, that creates chaos if your defense is trying to keep up with them rather than playing a zone. This is going to be absolutely fascinating to see which style wins out.
I think it's going to come down to something much simpler. Is Skinner going to have 2 or fewer blow-up games? If he does, if it's capped out at 2, and the rest of them he plays like he did on Game 6 against Dallas, I think Edmonton is heavily favored. If he has 3 or more blow-up games where, a few go by him and that really shouldn't, or he sub 900 save percentage, whatever you want to call it, then I think Florida, it tilts heavily their way. I think it hinges on the goaltending. Bobrovsky's Bobrovsky. I mean, he's not impenetrable. You've seen him have bad games and you've seen him fall off, and especially if he has some wear and tear, but he's very obviously a remarkably better goaltender. That doesn't matter over a 4 to 7 game stretch, though. That's too small of a sample size. Any goalie can get hot. And if Skinner can just do enough to keep Edmonton in it, in my mind, it's that simple. Keep the blow-up games to 2 or fewer. Play like you did in some of the games against Dallas for the rest, and I think McDavid takes us.
It's really hard to predict this series because it is 2 just completely different teams going at it. If Edmonton's got to be ready at the start of game 1 because Florida is going to make every single game a living hell if you're Connor McDavid, or if you're Philip Broberg, who's now getting injected back into the lineup. They have to be able to weather that storm physically and just the suffocation that team plays. And then they've got a chance. And then Stuart Skinner has to be on a different planet. He has to go supernova for them to have a chance. I'm still taking Florida because it's just been so impressive and just so kind of steady. That team has just put other teams in the chokehold and haven't let go. Whereas Edmonton's very much been an up and down, very roller coaster playoff for them. It's really hard to bet against Florida right now.
I was going to lean Edmonton, but then I saw that video of those guys all up in McDavid's personal space.
Yep, I'm so glad you brought that up. Florida in 3.
I've never been more physically uncomfortable. It was hard enough, and at the end, he's like, give me a hug.
They didn't even offer to carry their beer.
No, that was rough. That was a tough watch.
Hold on. See, this is where we draw different conclusions. You're 3 rounds deep in a grueling playoff. You're the best player on the planet. You've been getting beat up. You're tired. And you're making the beer run for your teammates. I will run through a wall for Connor McDavid.
2 cases of beer. Like, it wasn't a lot. I don't even think it was for the boys. I think they were just having company over.
Either way, I don't care who it was for, Ryan. McDavid himself was doing the beer run. As a player making $12.5 million after 3 rounds of the playoffs, he's in for the beer. That is a leader, Ryan.
Well, Brad, they don't really get compensated extra for the playoff game, so it's tough right now on these.
Well, he wouldn't have to go for the beer run if there was no salary cap, because he'd be making way more money. He could just pay someone to deliver to his house.
Won't someone think of the millionaires?
No one is.
This is a personal endeavor for you.
Save the rest for the Patreon exclusive.
You're right, Brad, but McDavid's he's a weirdo, right? We know this.
Probably felt uncomfortable asking someone else.
Boy, did he feel uncomfortable after that. Anyhow, I'm gonna lean Florida here. Genuinely, I think Edmonton has a lot of momentum, and it's hard to bet against a team that has the 2 best players on the planet right now. But I think with the way Florida plays, they can even the scales enough where Bobrovsky can make the difference. I'm not saying Skinner can't do it. I'm saying the odds are probably in Florida's favor, so I'll take Florida to win this.
I'm weighing my trust in Connor McDavid against my distrust in Stuart Skinner. The beer runners got my. You get Connor McDavid in the Stanley Cup Finals loaded up on 48 Labatt Blues. I'm in. I'm going with the Oilers.
How many games we got to call?
7.
Games? Oilers in 7.
Wow, that's crazy. I already said Florida in 3.
Okay, you want to do a backup guess in case the first one's wrong?
I'll do Florida in 6.
I've made a lot of stupid predictions, and I'm going to keep that going. These playoffs, I'm going to say Florida in 5. That's so bad. I said it out loud, and it feels so bad. Things have to go catastrophic.
But
if things are going well for Florida, I don't think Edmonton has a chance.
Florida has given us no reason at all so far in these playoffs to doubt them.
And I don't even think if things go well for Florida.
I think it's if by go well, I mean, can Stuart Skinner stop a puck?
If things go poorly for Edmonton.
Exactly. If Edmonton's winning this, but if Florida wins, it will be quick.
That's what I said. I'm going to stick to it. I'm happy to be wrong.
Now, if Stuart Skinner goes out and puts up a 42-save shutout in the first game, you're in trouble.
Yep.
If he lets in 5 in the first period, I think Evan's prediction of Florida in 3 will be true.
The thing is, though, we've seen Skinner's yo-yoing. He could be absolute dog water game 1. We could see Calvin Pickard in a cup final in game 2. Which, if you're Gary Bettman and you're like, I finally have Connor McDavid in the cup final and his goaltender is Calvin Pickard. Oh my God, I'm stealing Shesterkin and planting him on the Oilers. And then you can see Skinner back in game 3 and just he'll be lights out from games 3 to 7. He's kind of all over the map. I know this is such a generic statement, but you want to see 7 games. You want to see 7 games of this like built for the playoff machine, Florida Panthers. And then you want to see 7 games of what can McDavid and Draisaitl in their first ever cup final do.
Also, we need a game 7. We need it to go to overtime. And we need Connor McDavid to score it just to shut up those insufferable Edmonton writers. Just the years of... we need Connor McDavid to just put a swift and final end to them.
I've always said Edmonton's problems ever since Connor McDavid has gotten there it's been Connor McDavid. He's been what's
been holding them back. And his desire to win, I don't know. Yeah. It's just
a lightning rod of controversy.
Yeah.
Have you seen what the governor of Florida and the mayor of Edmonton have bet on this series?
I shudder to ask.
Well, whoever loses has to admit that climate change is real. True story. So neither team wants to lose.
They're going to extend the series to 11 if they have to.
They keep going.
All right, that's the Cup Final. Those are our predictions. It does not start till Saturday. We'll see how things go after Game 1. Over to Toronto while we're talking about diluted Canadian markets. Mitch Marner is playing hardball, to nobody's surprise.
That is an absolute shocker to no one.
This thing is happening right now where people are talking through the media because it's Toronto and it's Marner's camp, and it's just so normal for them that we kind of forget that this is actually not what happens across the rest of the league. Bigger markets, sure, but it's lightning rod can be applied here. But there's a lot of conversation about, are you going to trade Marner? Where would he go? When are you going to do it? Are you going to try to make it work? Do you try to do it even if you lose the trade? What you say publicly obviously only matters so much. You're never going to say, yeah, I'm going to willingly lose the trade just to get rid of Marner. You would never say that out loud. It tanks the trade value. Well, then all of a sudden there's a bunch of leaks, coincidentally, that Marner plans on playing out the season and, isn't really interested in doing much other than focusing on just playing his best hockey. And that's Toronto's biggest fear. If he refuses to waive that full no-move clause, which was a mistake from the moment it was awarded, walking him right to unrestricted free agency, they lose Mitch Marner for nothing. They gain the cap space, which is what they want to do anyways, but they lose him for nothing.
As a Red Wings fan, I am very happy we would not have to give up multiple picks and prospects to get him. We can just get him in free agency for free.
What's that saying? Never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake?
Exactly. Do we need Mitch Marner for this season? No, we do not. Would it be nice to have him for our cup window? Absolutely. Would I prefer to not give up Kasper and a first-round pick to do it? Absolutely. Sign me up, Mitch. He's playing 4D chess. Yzerman's already talked to him. We know what's happening.
And also, working along...
For the people who are taking that literally.
Yes, you do need that qualifier.
Yeah. Note the obvious sarcasm in that statement, though I hope it actually happens.
They passed each other on their boats up on Muskoka Bay.
Oh, yeah.
A simple nod and the plan was understood.
That's the only way Yzerman communicates, actually. Anytime he speaks English is actually through a translator on screen. The Marner thing also, like if he walks to unrestricted free agency, that gives teams, and jokingly Detroit, but a lot of teams time to figure out their cap space. And there's going to be a lot of people who are anti having Marner on your team. You don't want to pay him the amount of money he's going to demand. He's going to ask for 12, probably, right? At least.
Yeah, and there's about 8 teams in the league who desperately need a player like him that they can't ask questions.
Yeah.
You can't. He's available. Go. Do what you can.
Whether you like it or not, your favorite team's GM is going to be calling about Mitch Marner. If you think back to the whole Shesterkin jokey argument that Brad and I had last episode, there's a lot of great points about why Shesterkin in spending that money on a goalie isn't necessarily the best thing to do. But when elite players become available, GMs are going to check in. They would be remiss in not doing so.
Yeah, we as Red Wings fans, you can have your opinion about Mitch Marner, and does he actually shut down in the playoffs? Does he actually have attitude problems? I think both are overblown, but there's some truth a little bit. But we have been sitting on this podcast for nearly a decade going, oh my God, this team needs elite players. You do not have the luxury of going, but not that one. If one becomes available, you are making your pitch.
Well, they're going to end up trading him to Utah anyways.
Yeah, in all likelihood.
Lane Lambert, assistant coach in Toronto.
Poor guy.
A team that cannot play defensive hockey gets an assistant coach who's notoriously poor at building defensive teams. My God, this is going to go great. What did I say? Don't interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. There's not a lot of talking happening today.
We were joked about this beforehand, but I just can't imagine that Toronto's problem lies solely within the decision of one assistant coach. I don't think it matters all that much.
Our job here is done. We have Lane Lambert as an assistant coach.
Elsewhere in the NHL, a lot of buzz around Marty Necas. Some reporting, I think Frank Saravalli said he might be dealt even before Game 1 on Saturday, but there's a lot of conversation out in the public sphere about Marty Necas. Carolina asking for a lot of online debate on whether he's worth it. We've talked a little bit about it in terms of what he's worth versus what you're actually getting in terms of a fulsome, holistic player, but he seems to be a guy who has on the move stamped on him.
I will repeat, though I don't think Necas is elite like Marner.
No, not on the same level.
No, he's not elite at all, but he's very good and he's a capable top 6 scoring winger. The Red Wings do not have the luxury of not inquiring.
Yeah.
Will they be willing to meet the price? Is it worth it? Of course, there's yes or no as an option there. But if they are not inquiring, Steve Yzerman is not doing his job and has not identified the problems on this team.
And spoiler, they're inquiring.
Yeah. It could have been a 1-minute conversation, Steve going, yeah, Necas, what are you thinking? And they give the price, and Yzerman goes, I'm not even willing to get close to that. Have a good one. Fine, so be it. But they need to be inquiring.
It's kind of a unique window here with the cap going up and some teams who are trying to make sure they make the most of their windows. There's a lot of high-end players moving around recently. It feels like we've had way duller summers than this.
Hey, cap space creates chaos?
Yep, that's a great point. A lot of summers, Patrick Kane being an unrestricted free agent on the back of a really hot return to the NHL would be the biggest story of the summer, and every writer in the world would be praying that he wouldn't sign until like July 30th just so they'd have content. So this is a chaotic one.
Yeah, that's like number 12 on the storylines right now.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't understand why he's on the market, because they don't have like a whole whackload of guys off the books this year.
Well, he's just like
Evan, what did you say about your enemies?
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
He's not thrilled with his deployment there. They're not thrilled with how he's, played outside of what he's insanely talented at. It's one of those situations where the player and team just aren't meshing, square peg round hole kind of thing.
But
fair enough.
Like digging deeper into the Red Wings history, they just traded all their Czech players. Are they really going to acquire another one?
They
Well,
just
yeah, you need to
signed
redo the
one.
cycle.
They just signed a new one.
That's
This
right.
There you
is-
go. We're reacquiring the same number we punted out.
The phoenix rises from the ashes.
There is a
Right.
quota that has to be met, and we are under it right now.
That's right. Okay. I'm going to save the Major League Hockey conversation for a future episode. One thing I want to talk about. Utah. You saw they're going to go with, it's been confirmed, they're going with the Utah Hockey Club just for a year.
No.
Just for a year.
So they're going to sell all these jerseys, and
Yeah.
then they're going to rebrand. People are going to have to buy all these jerseys again.
Yeah.
Wow, it's almost like it's a money grab.
I'll say it's hard with the timeline.
It's not hard coming up with a team name.
But the whole branding thing, you want to do it right.
Oh, I agree.
They got Fanatics. Nothing could go wrong.
Dude, those hats. Did you
Oh
see?
my God.
The two-toned gray with the phenomenal.
The two-tone gray is the 11th worst thing on that hat.
I know. Have you circled it? It's so bad you kind of want one. Have you gotten there yet?
A little bit.
Like it's like a novelty item. Like those hats that have the fan on the little spinner on top.
Yeah,
of them?
yeah, novelty.
Who has one of those?
How do you tell the wind direction on the golf course?
But you can never see your own, so you have to have a buddy who wears one.
That's right. Well, that's why I bought two. They only made sense.
Anyhow, Utah Hockey Club is going with a black, white, and like light blue color scheme this year, and we're not saying it's guaranteed to be the case next year, but they just rebranded the Utah Jazz. Same ownership, Ryan Smith.
Looks
Their kits look insane.
Like-
so good.
that is the best kit in the NBA. Yeah,
The NBA has quite a few. good
there's a
jerseys.
lot of good options. But that's the one, right?
The NHL is dying for more purple.
Yes,
Now is the time.
do it. I don't even like Mountaineers the most, but if you need it to be the Mountaineers and you use the same mountain, how much did we like the Colorado Avalanche jerseys with the Avalanche making up like the bottom of it?
Yeah, I was lukewarm on them.
Okay, well, anyhow,
It's sick point.
thank you. Well, I'm going to shut up now. No, but seriously, like just do something fun, and I'm sure it can be fun. I'm sure it can be good with the colors they have, but you have so much with the Jazz that you can lean on. Even their burnt color scale jerseys that they did for, I think there was a special edition jersey that the Jazz had. So good.
The two things Pittsburgh and Seattle do right is every professional team in those cities matches the color schemes, and I love that. Everything in Pittsburgh's black and gold, or black and yellow. Everything in Seattle, some version of navy blue, green, foam, whatever you want to call that color. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. Utah, the Jazz has arguably the best unis in the league. Copy it straight up. Get it as close to that as you can.
Do NHL teams have full autonomy to do whatever they want with their jerseys?
Some, like, they need approval from the league, and they need to work with the manufacturer to make sure that they can, like, actually develop
You think
it.
Fanatics can replicate what the Utah Jazz have going on their jerseys?
You know, I've actually been told on really good authority by someone with an @fanatics.com email address that they're going to do it real good.
Okay,
So,
okay, never mind then. I take it all back.
I I think what's happening with Fanatics, though, is they are taking over a lot of the same production lines from Adidas, and it's going to be the same factory, the same people, and they're using a lot of the same specs, at least to start. At some point, they'll have to change into their own jerseys. I've heard that the jerseys for next season are going to be remarkably similar. I imagine the only thing that'll be different is the Adidas unique shoulder dimples, but by and large, are going to keep the same everything, like the stitching, the whatever I'm getting into upholstery here. Upholstery is not even the right word. Shut up, Ryan. But that all is going to look the same. And then within a year or so is when you're going to start to get into Fanatics actually making and designing how the jerseys are made. And then more third jerseys and things like that.
I guess for me, it's just a little disappointing because they could have had the opportunity at the Sphere to unveil this new team, this new logo, this new name, and really use it there and get the team logo on the outside of the Sphere and get some great shots of that. Instead, we're doing what we're doing now. To me, it's just another miss.
Okay, let's jump into overtime in this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. Overtime is brought to you by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. If you want to support the show, you allow us to do things like support the Jamie Daniels Foundation through initiatives like Winged Wheel Podcast Nights at the LCA in partnership with the Detroit Red Wings and the Grand Rapids Griffins. You also allow us to continue to produce this show, the Winged Wheel Podcast, and run it in the offseason and make it bigger and better. You also allow us to produce really great expanded content like Expected by Whom, hosted by Prashanth Iyer and Sean Shapiro. Go check them out, give them a follow, subscribe on YouTube, and lots more. And again, the benefits you get, the Discord, the bonus episodes, the giveaways, and lots more. So again, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. Questions from our patrons. Joey Jojo Shabadoo says, if you can copy and paste one former Red Wing in their prime onto today's roster, who would it be? I'd go Zetterberg, mainly because he was my idol growing up. We've answered this question like 3 times before, so I got to make sure to not change my answer because I always flip-flop between Yzerman and Lindstrom. I think you can flip-flop between Yzerman and Lindstrom. You can throw in Fedorov.
I'm going to go Yzerman.
How you could even say Gordie Howe in his prime. Then you're just like you're doing some weird era adjustment, and then you don't know if that's actually going to work.
Yzerman was that unique mix of like elite offense, and then eventually developed some really good defense. That sounds like exactly what they need right now.
I think I lean Yzerman right now over Lindstrom, but you can't go wrong with either. Fedorov also. You could get into Datsuk. Would it be like the most impactful pick? No, but Datsuk in his prime was...
Red Wings want to fix their goalie issue.
Oh, Dominik Hasek is such a good one.
I was thinking Terry Sawchuk, but we'll take Dominik Hasek too.
For my money, Hasek's the greatest of all time, though. He wasn't...
Yeah, but he wears a helmet, so he's a little soft.
Yeah, that's right. He wasn't at his peak with the Red Wings, though, is an important distinction, in case that matters for the hypothetical. Clip Clop Nene says, what classifies a player as a superstar, star, stud, elite, or barn burner? What does the current roster have, excluding the GOAT Petrie, of course? A lot of those are arbitrary, but...
Yeah, it's where you draw the line. Like, you have elite, superstar, star, all-star, whatever you want to call it, right? You know, if you want to go with this simplistic superstar versus star, I don't think the Red Wings have any superstars right now because that's your Matthews, your McKinnon, your McDavids. If you want to go into that second tier, I think you could make a case for Larkin and maybe Seider right now. I think Raymond's very close. That's probably it. And even that's probably, they're not in the upper tier of that category.
Yes. Like Seider and Raymond have potential to be superstars.
Superstars, like best in the league. I think Seider has a chance. I think even if Raymond gets up to 85 points a year, that probably still doesn't put him in superstar.
85 puts you at a star.
Yeah, you're a star. You're a point per game player. You're a star. Superstar, you got to be flirting with 100 as a winger.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
It's arbitrary. Elite to me is also like upper end of star and superstars. It's also, the labels are all made up. Yeah. It's actually, the rule is whatever's convenient to the conversation you're having right now.
Yes, exactly.
This question is relevant. We were laughing about this before the episode. Yan says, setting the over-under of mock drafts released till the draft that don't have the Red Wings selecting Brandzak Newgard at 0.5.
Every single one of them is going to... the over-under, we're doing that? 0.5?
It's set at 0.5. Are you taking the under?
Oh, 100%.
It's why I didn't take him in the Red Wings mock, because I'm like, it just feels so Red Wings. And even if that's your type, do you not look after a while? Again, you run the risk Like, I actually feel bad because I feel like this is pushing the conversation into saying Brandzeg Newgard would be a bad pick. And all three of us have said we would actually really, really like the pick. And he is not the exact same as, the other players the Red Wings have. It's just everyone keeps saying in these mocks, this just feels like a Red Wings pick.
Why are we the only team that has a moniker that's, oh, this is a Red Wings pick?
Because they've stuck to it almost religiously since Yzerman's got there. It's like you take your favorite food. It will always be your favorite food, and you like it. But if you eat it every day, eventually you're going to crave something different.
I think other teams must have this. We just don't pay attention.
Oh, Carolina has a type.
Buffalo has a type.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, they don't have a type. They have a draft philosophy.
Yeah, that's probably the more... Well, yeah, that's the thing. Yzerman... You can have a draft philosophy, but Yzerman has a type because he sticks to it in the draft and free agency.
Yep.
Dylan Larkin's Nana says there have been a lot of jokes about what it would cost to trade for McDavid, but honestly, if he was on the trade block tomorrow, what would it realistically cost? Larkin, Raymond, 3 first-rounders, more? And would you do whatever that cost might be?
So you have to assume because he's coming up on unrestricted free agency, there'd be an extension in place. So we'll go under that hypothetical. You can pay him the max. I don't care. It doesn't matter. He's worth it. Realistically, yeah, you're probably going to have to cover 2 premium positions on the current roster for Edmonton. So you're probably looking at Larkin and Seider. And then probably a first-round pick and a really good prospect on top of that. Like, you have to be, like, you're not giving up 8 premium assets because you're just gutting your roster, but that's probably what it's going to cost because he's the best player on the planet. And this is the second time he's almost single-handedly willed the Oilers to the Cup Final, losing in the conference final before, actually getting there this time.
There's no, like, it breaks the market. A lot of players you have to factor into how much money they're going to bring to teams to put butts in seats. Like, if a team is trading a bunch of futures and they're getting an established superstar, whether you like it or not, part of the equation will be, hey, you're going to sell more tickets and that is going to earn your organization more money and it's going to be good for you overall. And that's first round draft picks in the future. You love to have them. No one goes to games.
It doesn't make you money tomorrow.
No. So that's going to be part of it. McDavid breaks that. He is bringing in so much revenue, season tickets, butts in seats, jersey sales, all of it. So that's part of it. How much do you add to the futures pile? None of the futures you give up are ever going to be the best player on the planet. There's a very, 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 very slim chance. And if you have Connor McDavid on your team, you're generally not winning draft lotteries, which I mean, no, Edmonton, I get the joke. It's to the point where it's unreasonable, but you still kind of have to do it because you have a chance of having the best player on the planet on your team.
That's why other than Wayne Gretzky, you never see this happen.
But even Gretzky getting traded was such a unique scenario where the owner just ran out of money, couldn't keep him.
Yeah.
Like, they would have never traded him unless they absolutely had no other choice.
Horrible news for those of you who didn't know this, but Wayne Gretzky went to sleep one night thinking he was going to be a Detroit Red Wing in the morning. And then his dad talked him into LA because he said, Detroit, has their legends, and that's Gordy's team and, Wayne's favorite player growing up. You go out west, you make your mark in California, you build something there, which, I mean, the NHL has him to thank for hockey in California, of course, but
I'll never forget the night I first heard that story. I was at a private event.
That makes me want to throw up.
Yeah, it's actually sick.
I was at a private event at the Hockey Hall of Fame where they surprised us as the main speaker was Wayne Gretzky. This was the greatest night of my life. Everybody was on cloud nine, and then he told that story, and I was sick to my stomach the rest of the night.
It's the first time I've ever booed Wayne Gretzky.
I drove right to Brantford and punched Walter Gretzky right in the face.
Him or the statue?
Yes.
All right. Moving on here. Question from this one. I know it's a lot of trade hypotheticals, but I think this one's interesting. Dylan Johnson, who I believe is a brand new patron, welcome to the Dub Club, says, if you were to make a package trade for Gibson and Zegras, and this isn't insane, this would actually make sense even though it's a big trade, what would be a fair offer from the Wings? Do you think this trade would even be likely?
Gibson and Zegras? NHL GMs are not creative enough for that. Like, what would the cost for Gibson be? You're doing Anaheim a favor by clearing up a lot of cap space, but he's still an asset. I have to imagine Anaheim's asking a first-round pick for Gibson. I don't know if anybody would give them that him.
No. Because he's not exactly put up the stats to like the scale is tilting a lot more towards Gibson's not actually as good anymore, and my belief that goalies don't just lose their talent overnight is quickly fading on that front.
Yeah.
So it's a hard sell for Anaheim.
So let's say they settle and they come to a middle agreement on a second-round pick and a B-level prospect. So let's say Amadeus Lombardi. Okay, Lombardi and a second-round pick for Gibson. Then with Zegras, he's actually at a pretty reasonable cap hit, so Anaheim's not in any sort of urgency to unload that money, but maybe they don't like him as a player. He's definitely commanding a first-round pick.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if he's a first-round pick and an A-level prospect or if that's a first-round pick and a B-level prospect. Probably someone who's on the fringes, let's say. Would Mazur be too much? Probably not.
That's what they actually, you'd think that's what they would ask for considering their familiarity with Detroit's system.
Yeah, so
with Verbeek, but
let's say, okay, so the trade's probably something along the lines of first, a second, and a good prospect. And a decent prospect.
And then, honestly, if Detroit's doing this, they're going to have to shed money somehow, so maybe you have to pay more to throw in a bad contract.
Maybe you upgrade Lombardi to, I don't know, Johansson. But
put Husso going in the other way.
And then, you have a bad contract going the other way. Husso's only got 1 year left. You're probably hoping to unload someone with term. Maybe this is your taker for Justin Holl because it's only 3 and change, but it is 2 years.
And I have to say this feels comfortable, so it's probably more than this.
Yeah. I think it's just the framework, and then you're filling out the edges as needed.
All right.
Not a true NHL trade until there's a conditional fourth in there.
That's right. Yeah, 4th round pick to seal it. All right, last one here from Awit says, do you think that Raymond could be the 40-goal scorer that the Wings need? And if so, what are the odds of it happening? I feel like if he had another year like he just did in his prime, I could see him scoring 9 more.
I think if he gets more help around him, it could happen.
You inject Raymond on
if he plays the full season with Larkin and DeBrincat, I think it's possible. But that hinges on 2 things. One, the second line being able to carry itself, which is why Raymond spent a lot of time moonlighting on the second line. And B, Dylan Larkin staying healthy for a full year.
Yeah, I think Raymond could absolutely be the 40-goal guy. Season in, season out, it depends on how good the Wings are. But even if the Wings are exactly as good as they are right now, I still think he gets there. All right, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. Appreciate you all so much for tuning in. Thank you to Labatt Blue Light for sponsoring the show. If you're new to the show, welcome. Appreciate you listening. And if you're a listener of old, welcome to another off-season together. We hope you're having fun. If you want to support the show, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. Again, the bonus episodes, the Discord, the giveaways. And if Patreon's not for you, but you still want to support the show, give us a rating wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. Hit that subscribe button. Also, the thumbs up on YouTube. Tell a friend. It all helps a ton. To all of our patrons, we could not do this without you. And our name-level supporters on Patreon, we can't thank you enough. Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Aikfer, Samuel Soderholm, Icon, Victor Zetterberg, Ryan, Brad, I'm swallowing, Hannah, Glenn Brabham, Croner's left knee, Ashley Van Conant, Sea-Lion, Keenan O'Donohue, Brad is wrong and plays like Sprong, I think is what that's supposed to say. Matthew M. Rice, Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy, Avery Sloppy Seconds, Carl Bertinen Analuski, Carl Provy, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nene, Connor Scovey, Craig Kibble, Denny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, Sider, Dickens, DJ Denton. Don't say anything, Ryan. It'll be funny if you don't say anything, Ryan. Play along. It'll be funny, Ryan. Just skip over this, Ryan. Ha. God Creatives, Give Blood, Fight Probert, Goose Looney's Drinking Club, Hockeytown Love, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, Jeff Pridemore, Joel Miranda, Jonathan Miller, Kaylin Wood, Marcus, Matt Keeler, Matt McKay, Michael Edlund, R.A., Rawl, Pud, S. Klein, Scott Martin, Skeletor, Scree and Lube, Stoli70 Wingnut. That's what I appreciate about you. Utah Stormin' Mormons, Wallman's Elite Dancing D, Iserplan Stan, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Sam Bankson, AB, Adam Rose, All Motor No Hands, Axel Sandin Pellikka, Bellingham Acid Balls, Brad Simmons, Chi-Town Wings Fan, Chimkim Nuggets, Chuck Buffchest, the Tarpless Goon, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Leighton, Corey Prida, Darren Fick, Datsuk's Dirty Deke, Eric Nance, Evans Fourth Putt, Frank Stanley, Gene Sullivan, Griffey Boy, James Pridemore, Jeremiah Dobo, JM Rhapsody, Joey Jojo Shabadoo, John Evans Derogatory, John Ingalls, Josh Yelton, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Linda Hull, Michigan Boy Navs Country, Ophelia, Salt Lake Sugar Girly, Steven, The Hodag, The Hat 123. This episode is sponsored by Twisters. Tom Yzer playing Respecter. Throw the Road Puss. To the Honeys getting money playing fellas like dummies. I love it when you call me Big Chungus. Wings fan in St. Louis, Scott Reed. And your second favorite patron. Thank you all so very much. We'll talk to you Sunday.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockey Town Evan.